Welcome back to What's Next with Lacey, the podcast where I interview young professionals about their career journeys so far. Guys, it's freaking season 2 of What's Next. I am so excited to be back. I truly did not envision What's Next lasting more than maybe 3 episodes. So the fact that I'm on season 2 is actually crazy. Thank you guys for listening and sticking with me. It really means a lot. And because of all of you, I've been able to watch What's Next grow, and it's absolutely awesome. So on that note, I hope you are all as ready as I am for season 2 of What's Next, because there are so many more conversations to be had and jobs to learn about. Truly, I think this season is going to be absolutely incredible. In fact, it is time to jump right in. This episode, I will be speaking with the wonderful Amit. Amit recently graduated from medical school and is starting his residency in internal medicine. Now, I have watched every episode of Grey's Anatomy and every single episode of House, and sadly, I realized A, not super accurate, but B, watching all those episodes does not a doctor make. So that was a bummer, but it was really interesting to chat with Amit. We take a deep dive into the ins and outs of medical school, how it works, how to succeed, how to survive. He really has all the tips and tricks and all the insights. So let's dive right in. And I hope you enjoy my conversation with Amit. Amit, welcome to What's Next.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. I am so excited to dig into your story. You just graduated medical school. How does it feel?
Honestly, can I say that I don't feel any different now that I have the MD next to my name?
No way. That's hilarious.
Med school for me, like, especially given that it was like during the pandemic and all, and like it was very unique for everyone graduating this year or like over the past couple of years, in that like I was able to like create like a social atmosphere that most people, I guess, who aren't in a school or a college would have during like pandemics, since it was so isolating. So it felt like I almost never left college. So when I graduated, it was like the same feelings we get when we graduate college. Like instead of like being like, yes, there's excitement for what's next, and there's like, wow, I've accomplished something. There's also like, I don't want to leave my friends. Like I don't want them to leave me. Like I don't want to become a real adult. Like
yeah,
all of those. It like kind of delayed that for me since I didn't really get a job.
I mean, yeah, you really are about to embark on a whole journey, which we will get to in due course, but damn, very cool. Congrats on that. So I want to start with your medical school experience. Can you briefly break down just like, what are the highlights of the 4 years? How does it work when you're at medical school?
Yeah, so I guess I'll say how it normally is and then how it was for me, because obviously different situations. Normally your first, like, depending on the school, you're either your first 2 years or your first year and a half are like the same thing like undergrad. You're just reading textbooks. Well, nobody reads textbooks, but like you're just like reading and attending lectures and like learning. It's called the basic science curriculum. So you like that we're talking like anatomy, physiology, biochem again, because we can't escape that, all of that. And then like that's supposed to set the foundation for the next 2/2.5 years, depending on where you are, which is like your clinical science years, where you go into the hospital and you rotate in all the different specialties. So like the third year, you rotate in your core specialties, which for my school was family medicine, psychiatry, neurology, internal medicine, surgery, OB-GYN. I might have missed pediatric. So those were the 7 at my school, which tend to be mostly what most schools do. So you rotate through each of those for like 4 to 6 weeks in my case. And then third year is supposed to be like so a lot of people at my med school, like they came into med school knowing like, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon or whatever. Mm-hmm. I did not. And I'd say at least half my class also did not. And third year is really when you find out like what you like, where you can see yourself being, because almost every field branches out from like those 7 in some way or the other. Like even if you're not doing a specific, like let's say you're doing orthopedic surgery. If you enjoy surgery, that will make you feel like you could enjoy orthopedic surgery. They're different, but like, it's the basics. So like that third year is mainly for like realizing and understanding what you want to do. At the end of my third year, I was like torn between internal med and psychiatry. And then it was only in my start of my 4th year, literally a month before applications go out for residency, that I like settled on internal med. And then 4th year is once you settle on one of those, you like do more targeted clinical rotations towards that.
And then how did COVID affect your schoolage?
Yeah, so since I started in July, August 2020, it was like just it was right when COVID was like wreaking havoc. Everything was virtual. I'm a little bit lucky that I wasn't in my clinical years during that because like different school like they went crazy. Like some people like graduated 6 months early to immediately join the like COVID workforce in like emergency rooms and ICUs. Like schools made offers like that. People were pulled out of rotations. In my case, what it meant is all of my preclinical classes were basically virtual. Like it wasn't until my second year that I really started going in person. The only real in-person stuff my first year was like anatomy lab, which has to be like where you go like you have like the cadavers and you're exploring all of that stuff. That was not virtual because how can it be? But what it meant is lectures were like on Zoom or pre-recorded. I wouldn't watch them and then I'd watch them later at like 2x speed or not at all.
Hilarious. Yeah, no, 100%. I do feel very bad for the people who were in some form of academic world during COVID. I can imagine that was just so tough and really had an influence on that whole experience. But I'm glad to hear that it was during your courses, and so you didn't have to go through the whole shenanigan of being in rotation during that time. So then, speaking of courses, what was a typical day during that course time? How many classes did you have per day? How many hours of like work were you really doing per day? How did that all work?
Yeah, so that's hard to pinpoint because it's totally different for everyone. Like if you were doing things diligently, I guess, if you were attending all your classes, we'd be looking at like, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 hours of lectures a day, not too much. But then like the lectures honestly don't cover that much of what you need to know. So after that, it would also be like an equivalent amount of time, like reading up associated concepts. For me, it was more like I didn't attend any of the lectures. I didn't have to. So I would like that would be sped up by me going 2x speed. But then because of that, I would also need to read outside resources maybe a little bit more. But like it was similar to undergrad in a lot of ways where like especially the classes which didn't have mandatory attendance in the sense of like I didn't really have a regular schedule. I could wake up mostly whenever I want, pending something being required, sleep whenever I want to. So it was very similar to that.
Yeah.
And then it like was starkly different third and fourth year when like, if I have to be in the hospital at 6 a.m., I cannot be sleeping at 4 a.m. Like,
yeah. Do you have any control over the courses that you took during your first 2 years, or was it just completely prescribed?
Zero control your first 2 years. Your entire class is in all of your classes, your first couple of years. Third and fourth year is when you have a choice. Third year, you have a choice on the order and like also location because there's like 6 or 7 different hospitals we had the choice to. Choice is a strong word. It's all a lottery. But like, there are like multiple choices for each rotation, and like you could take the rotation in varying different orders. And then fourth year is like completely like almost your choice.
Oh, damn. Okay. So was it then also in these courses like undergrad, you still had midterms, you had finals, you had exams? Was it pretty much exactly the same?
Yeah, it depends on the course really, but for a lot of them, yeah, there would be quizzes, there would be midterms. It wasn't midterms, it was more like 4 big tests every block or whatever. Like I don't even remember if any course had like a pure midterm, but I don't really think so. It was more just tests every like 4 or 5 weeks. But like since you're taking 3 or 4 classes and they're tests like every 4 or 5 weeks, you're taking a test like almost every couple of weeks at the end. Sometimes multiple tests in the same week. But also because the whole class was in it, like the professors tried to work with each other. Like they were like, oh, you have this test then, we'll do this like a week or whatever.
I mean, gosh, yeah, that sounds intense. So then does your results from these first 2 years have any impact into the rotations, like how the rotations work? You mentioned it was a lottery, or do they have an impact on like later on in your career? Like how important are they, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so again, depends on on which school you go to. At my place, preclinical years, as most US MD institutions, were pass fail in the sense of like you did get a grade. And at my school, it actually affected your class rank, which was determined at the end of third year. But so which was weird because that means it wasn't really pass fail because like if you did better, you'd be a leg up on your class rank.
Yeah.
But like let's say every class gets credits. Your like clinical third year courses, let's say there were 16 credits. Your preclinical courses were like 4 credits. So like each course was relatively less important.
Oh, I see.
So like it had relatively less bearing on what your class rank was. It was just mostly about passing.
Yeah. That makes sense. So then we get to this third year and you're going through all these different rotations. Do you remember the order of your rotation and why you chose that order?
Well, I got my like seventh choice, I think, of like order.
Oh, no.
But what was my order? It turned out to be pretty good. I started off on psych, which I maintain was probably my favorite preclinical rotation or my favorite third year rotation, which was really nice. And it was also like, I don't want to say psych is easy. As a subject, it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
It is not easy to be a psychiatrist. But in terms of the content you need to know in medical school, it's considered one of the easier rotations.
Interesting.
So like it was a good like warm up into everything. And then after psych, I had I think then I had like a pretty brutal like so three of our rotations, psych, neuro, and family med are 4 weeks, and those are considered like the less strenuous rotations.
Mm-hmm.
And then the core four of like surgery, peds, internal med, and OB-GYN, which I had in literally that order, are the 6 week more difficult rotations. So after psych, I had those four back to back to back to back, which was it was decent. Surgery was like very, very much not my thing. And I knew I did not want to be a surgeon going into med school. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew it was not that. It got confirmed during anatomy. Like anatomy is kind of where people realize whether they want to do surgery or not in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like I was dissecting and doing all that stuff. And I was like, wow, like this is not that interesting. Like, this is not what I like look forward to.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. I could see why people like it. But it didn't give me any sort of.
Was it the cutting up of people that really was like, this isn't doing it for me?
I don't know. Like, I want to say it's more like it's not like cutting up was not doing it for me. It was more like cutting up was not something I enjoyed. It's not something I disliked or had any aversion to, but like it's not something I looked forward to. Whereas I had a lot of classmates who were like, "Oh man, I'm so excited to get to this unit and like explore this or whatever." For me, I always knew I wanted to do something more like thinking rather than cutting.
Yeah, that's very fair. Gosh, the idea of just cutting someone open though, to me, just like, this is why I wasn't meant to be a doctor. I could not do it.
Trust me, I wasn't able to escape that because like I said, we all have to do those rotations. And even in like internal med, you can't escape that. You're obviously not going in and doing surgeries, but you still have to like cut things, suture, like do all of that stuff. So yeah. I'll have to deal with that.
So are you at the same hospital when you do all your rotations, or are you moving to different hospitals depending on your rotation?
Yeah, so it's still a lottery. There were some people who did every single rotation they had at Westchester Medical Center. There was a lot of people. So for my school, so New York Medical College, we had two main sites: Westchester Medical Center and then Metropolitan Hospital. That's our other main affiliated site. So a lot of people they like moved to the city third year, and they tried to do all of their rotations there. And then there's also like auxiliary sites. Like there's one in Staten Island. There are two upstate, like one in Poughkeepsie, one in Kingston. There's one in Newark. So they're just all around. And like, depending on your school situation, there'll be some schools are even in more like screwed situations. Like a lot of the like Caribbean MD schools, for example, they're in a position where like their Caribbean school does not have a home hospital site.
Oh.
So like while their school will be in like Antigua, for example, they'll have to go to like Chicago, New York, like upstate, like random sites around. For my school, it was slightly better in the sense that like we had a lot of ability to get what we wanted, and like it didn't put us super far out of our way. I basically wanted Westchester for most of my things because I think it's the best hospital in our network. Metropolitan's decent, but it's not as full service of a hospital as Westchester. But like the way it works is for each rotation. So you rank locations and rotation. So like, for example, I knew I wanted to do IM most likely and psych. So like I put like internal medicine at Westchester as my like number one choice. And I put psych as Westchester as like my number three choice or whatever, like that. But like it's paired. So I put like OB-GYN choices. Like I didn't want to do OB-GYN. I knew that was not something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I put all of like the OB-GYN choices, including Westchester, like pretty low down, just so I could make sure I got my choices for other rotations.
Yeah.
And similar for surgery. So I ended up actually having to do OB-GYN in Staten Island, which was not fun. I had to live in Staten Island for 6 weeks, and it wasn't like the nicest part of Staten Island. And OB-GYN is notorious for being like some of the worst hours. So that was a brutal 6 weeks. I did surgery at Metropolitan, also brutal. Because for Metropolitan, the school didn't provide us city housing. So even though it wasn't my first choice, like I was responsible for either getting a sublet for that 6 weeks, or which I did not do. I drove from Westchester for 6 weeks, and my rotation started at 6 a.m. every day. Also brutal.
Also brutal. So, how did you get through the rotations that you didn't want to do?
A lot of it was like by like for surgery, for example, I was pretty close with my like there were four of us. And I wasn't that close to any of them beforehand, but like we got pretty close and like they're still my friends. So like we kind of had each other. And I'll be honest, if like the people there were overall pretty nice and good, but there were some malcontents who like actively made our days worse.
Yikes.
Like there was one time which I got in at 6:05 a.m. and got screamed at. Even though I like, by the way, like from 6 to 7 every day at Metropolitan, you don't do anything as a student. You're just watching them sign out on their patients and like describe stuff. Then you're just sitting there quietly. So me being 5 minutes late did not impact them. I get the point. You want to be on time on your rotations, but like I got yelled at.
Damn.
And I was like, I'm not even getting paid for that. I'm paying money to get yelled at here. Like, What is this? So it was definitely tough. It was a tough time. Also, like I did surgery like October, November-ish. So when I drive there, it's dark. When I get there, it's dark. And when I leave, it's getting dark.
Yeah.
So that also didn't help.
So are you like doing doctor things when you're doing these rotations, or are you more in like an observational role?
Somewhere in between is the best answer. So like, for example, like the best rotation to talk about this might be surgery. So like for surgery, for example, my day-to-day, what it would look like is 6 to 7. I'm like trying to stay awake while they're signing out. And then we round on all the post-surge or pre-surgical patients, see how they're doing, see if they need dressing changes, which we would help with. Sometimes it got really gross, stuff like that. And we would help out with that. And then like, let's say 8 or 9 a.m. is when like the first surgery started, we would scrub in. So like there would be one student per like there would be multiple surgeries going on at the same time, obviously. And the one good thing about Metropolitan was we kind of got a lot of autonomy to what cases we wanted to go to.
Cool.
So we would get to choose things which we found relatively interesting to us, or if there's nothing interesting, we just choose something. And we would show up and like depending on the surgeon and their comfort, they would give you different levels of autonomy. There were definitely some surgeons who like were like very heavy-handed and they were like, I'm gonna do this, like I'll let you hold stuff. Yeah. And like that's like the joke, the med student joke. Like you're holding like a retractor and you're just standing there for like 3 hours, like just dying, falling asleep while the surgeon's doing the cutting and like the all of that. Then there were some better, like more educational surgeons who would like, as they were going through it, they would like show you and they would ask you questions. They're like, oh, what is this nerve right here? Like, what is this blood vessel? Or like, where am I here? Or like, why did we do this specific step? Which is called pimping, where they like ask you questions and like, you're likely underprepared for it and you look like an idiot. But like most people did it intact. Like if you got it wrong, they would not like get mad at you. They would just explain to you.
Yeah.
So like mostly I did not have a bad issue with that in any of my rotations. And then sometimes like the really enterprising or trusting surgeons would let you like go in and like, there's a Bovie tool, which it's called a Bovie. It's like kind of like, it provides like an electric shock, which like, let's say there's like a small blood vessel that's leaking during the surgery.
Yeah.
You put the Bovie and you like shock it so that it's like cauterized so that like the blood's not going through it. Stuff like that. Sometimes they'd let us join in on that. Sometimes they'd let us do a little bit of cutting. Sometimes they'd let us suture at the end. So like that's the degree of involvement we had. We had like no real autonomy, but we had supervised autonomy in some situations. And then for like non-surgical rotations, like psych, I had like almost complete autonomy. It was amazing. Like what we would do is we'd bring the patient into the interviewing room. Or this honestly, my first day, remember, psych was my first rotation, and this is why I loved it. My first day, we brought the patient into the interviewing room. I had no idea what was going on. Like, this was my first rotation. And then the psychiatrist turned to me and he was like, you can begin. And I was like, what?
What? What did you do? Start asking
so
questions?
I did like a full psych interview. Like, yeah. And like he would jump in, like if he felt like I wasn't leading it correctly, but like he barely jumped in. And then he really liked me. And like, I think naturally I like psych a lot because I like talking to people. So like, basically I was leading conversations. So it was pretty great. And then in internal medicine, similar kind of concepts, like there'll be like 10 patients on like your list. And like you as a student will be maybe somewhat responsible for like one or two of those patients, a couple of those patients. And for those patients, you'll really be doing a lot of the legwork. You'll be going, seeing how they're doing, interviewing them, seeing if they need any changes, just talking with the nurses, talking with other teams that are consulted for the patient, and then reporting to the residents and the attendings. And meanwhile, you always have supervision as a student.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So then what was it about your internal medicine rotation that you decided you loved so much and like made the scale tip towards internal medicine?
Yeah. So for what's really true of psych and internal med and also pediatrics is that they're pretty cerebral fields. A lot of it's based on like talking to people and then using your like bank of knowledge to like kind of figure out what's going on, make a differential of like, these are the possible things that could be going on. Then actually going in and finding out what happens and like solving that puzzle. That's really what I wanted to do in like medicine. Like I want to be like a puzzle solver. I don't want to be like a fixer. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll let the surgeons handle that. I want to be the one who goes in and like kind of like almost like House.
I was about to say, I was literally like, you're basically Dr. House.
Yeah, except for what he does is that's barely medicine. But like
what? It's not accurate? I'm shocked.
Not accurate and very unethical. But
that's hilarious.
But essentially that concept, that's what really appeals to me about it. And then why I chose internal med over psych is that I think I can, in a lot of ways, bring psych into internal med. Like everybody needs some psych.
Yeah.
Like a lot of patients and their families, like they need someone to talk to, someone to reassure them, that part of things. Whereas in psychiatry, I loved it, but like it felt very silent from the other fields. Like if there was a medical issue, like they would call the appropriate medical physician to come deal with it. And that happens a lot in medicine too. Like if there's any patient that's behaving in any way psychotic or depressed, like instead of handling it themselves, a lot of times they'll just call the psychiatrist to come, or like, oh, tell us if this patient's competent and stuff like that. Yeah. That's not the type of medicine I want to practice. And I have the ability not to practice that. But like if I was in psychiatry, I have less of an ability to not practice that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you mentioned that there was like a class rank at the end of your third year. So were you doing during these rotations like anything, were you doing more exams or anything to help with that class rank?
Yeah.
So on top of all your rotations, you're doing exams.
Exactly. So like I'd be like, let's say my surgery rotation, I'd be a Metropolitan from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then at the end of the 6-week rotation, there's like a standardized NBME exam. It's what it's called. It's like a standardized exam that's kind of given around the country to a lot of schools. Some schools don't participate, but like it's basically testing like your knowledge in the entire field of surgery, for example.
Wow.
Or like after every rotation, that particular rotation's NBME exam. And then your grade for the rotation was based on two things: your NBME score and your clinical score, which would be determined by the like supervisors of the rotation, the lead attendings in consort with the residents and the and whoever else you worked with. Yeah. And they would come and they'd give you a clinical grade, which was pass, high pass, honors. Like those were the 3 grades. Mm. And then your numerical score on the NBME exam also corresponded to a pass, high pass, or honors. And the way it would work is to bring those 2 grades together to give you an overall grade of pass, high pass, or honors for the rotation.
Oh, damn. Is it then your overall grade is like for all of the rotations? But if you were like you want to go into internal medicine, you're going into internal medicine. Did it then your internal medicine grade only be the one that mattered, or does it matter for like all of them?
They all matter. They all go into your class rank, which like in our school is divided into quintiles. So like for the first quintile, the top quintile were people who got honors on like every single rotation, which is ridiculous to expect. But like some people can do that.
Yeah.
Because like, you could be the perfect student, but you just have like some, again, I'll use the word malcontents as your like preceptor or whatever. Yeah. And no matter what you do, like you just don't get an honors on the clinical portion, even though you're a perfect student. Yeah. So now you're forced to get a high pass overall through no fault of your own, which is why a lot of this becomes subjective. So it takes some degree of luck, but also a lot of hard work to get honors on all your rotations. So then like all of them matter, but like it's particularly, I guess, slightly more important to do well on the rotation for what you want to do, because residencies can see what you got on all your rotations. So if you're applying to a specific field and you only got a pass on that rotation, they'll be like, why did he kind of suck at this?
Yeah, No, absolutely. So then looking at your fourth year, you mentioned that that's when you go into more specific internal medicine in your case, or like your specialty area. So what did your fourth year look like for you?
Yeah. So what really sealed the deal was my first rotation of fourth year. I did the medical ICU, where I was like dealing with it was basically internal medicine on steroids is like the best way to put it. Like you're dealing with a lot sicker patients with a lot more complex like issues at hand, which you have to figure out. And then there's the psychiatry aspect of like a lot of like I had a lot of patients who passed away, and I had to like help be the one to inform the families. And like, you know, a lot of these patients are not conscious or speaking because you've sedated them to like, you know, help them recover.
Yeah.
So a lot of the talking is through their proxies. So it was really sad at a lot of times, but it also felt so rewarding. And then like I also had a series of like patients with like crazy issues going on, which I just found so interesting. So that sealed my deal for medicine. That's when I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, not psych. But then after that, you know, you can do stuff like pulmonology, cardiology, electives, stuff like that. I also chose some interesting electives. Like, so we have to do 5 clinical electives our fourth year, each one being a month long. We have to do a sub-I, which is like you're basically acting as a resident in your field of choice. So I did internal medicine, and this time I did it at Lenox Hill Hospital.
Yeah.
So I did that there. I did my MICU at Westchester. And then we also get some non-clinical electives, which we're allowed to do. So like I did health policy, I did multiculturalism in medicine, I did a research block, things like that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Those ones you weren't going into a hospital for, were you?
No.
Were they just like similar to like courses essentially?
They were different. Like, so multiculturalism in medicine was like no lectures at all. It was completely online. Like, it was like discussion board type class, like where you read things, you post, and like you react. And then, yeah, there was a midterm and final, or there were like midterm and final papers or projects and stuff like that. Health policy, we met every week, a couple times, over Zoom. And there was a few in-person sessions, but they were not like clinical in-person sessions. They were just like roundtables, like discussions. So like it really depended on it. And then the research elective was whatever you do for research.
Very cool. Then what like support network, was there support network, like a support network through your school to help you through this? I mean, it sounds just like so unbelievably intense, and it kind of like, you're kind of like thrown out into the deep end and you're like on your own, kid. So like, was the school helpful in that regard?
I think if you ask most med students about their medical schools, they'll talk about the incompetencies of their administrations. Like, I think the school did their best in a lot of ways. I think they could have done better in a lot of ways to support us. I think some of the advice which I got during med school was pretty awful at times, like sometimes even damaging. But like a lot of times I felt like they were like the administrators I was talking to were being earnest and trying to help. Another issue that happens is like people like, who are purely administrative, like non-clinical administrative, like they can't really know what we're going through. So while they try to help, sometimes it's the opposite of helpful. And then the clinical ones, sometimes it's even worse because they know what we're going through, but they went through it 30 years ago, and when it was a much different time and there were much different expectations and there was less of an emphasis of like humanity.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And sometimes things like that trickle down. But overall, the school did a pretty good job of keeping everything like as a whole well supported. Like if you were feeling depressed, if you had any sort of mental health issue, like there was a lot of resources for you available, which they made available. The class as a whole was very supportive with each other. Like there was different clubs and groups which people were part of, which helped helped each other out, or like set up events for us, or like, just brought people together.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of support in the end, but a lot of it was what we had to make of it ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we briefly touch upon the matching process? I feel like that's probably a fairly well-known like thing. You get your envelope and you're like, I'm matching it whatever to whatever. But how does it actually work?
Yeah, so it is as crazy as it sounds. Essentially, to start off with, like, essentially you like in like September is when it opens up. And you send out applications to everywhere. It's like college. You have to like pay for the application. Sometimes they send you supplementaries or whatever, or like even apply to med school. It's similar to that. Like you apply to a bunch of places, and most of them will not give you an interview. But like the interviews start trickling in at the end of October and stuff like that, all throughout the season, like up to like February, kind of. So you apply to a bunch of places. They'll give you interviews. And then the interviews for me were all virtual. That's not always the case. Some like a couple of my friends had some in-person interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we progress, like next year, we'll have more in-person interviews again, whatever. Before COVID, almost all interviews were in person, which was a huge burden because if you're applying around the country, you have to go fly there. And most places will not help you out with that.
Damn.
So in a way, that was kind of a blessing. Like I had an interview out in California, but I just did it over Zoom. So I had one in like Georgia, like like it helped a lot to have it all over Zoom. So then that happens, you get a bunch of interviews, and then after your interviews in like January, February, around then is when your part of the ranking happens and their part. So let's say you have 20 interviews. You rank those schools 1 to 20, or those hospitals 1 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
Each hospital you interviewed at will have X, like let's say each hospital, this is not accurate, but like let's say each hospital has like 200 people they interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
They rank each of those 200 people 1 to 200. And then the match algorithm, which is like a computer algorithm, which like, I actually heard that it originated from like the sorority match algorithm, like something like that. Like that's what I was told.
That is so funny. That is the most ridiculous process, having gone through it. To know that doctors, like futures are decided through that is wild.
Yeah. So it was based off of that, I think. But like what happens is like it's applicant favored in the sense of like if a program interviews 200 people and they have 40 spots, let's say, and you put them number 1,
yeah,
and they put you number 50. So you're not in that top 40. But if in those 49 people ahead of you, more than 10 people chose somewhere else as their number 1 and got into that, then you are next up. And even if you put it at number 1 and now you can match there, even if the place you put at number 2 put you as number 1, you'd still go to the place number 1.
Interesting.
So it's applicant favored. Like if you can get into that program, it'll match you. Like if you couldn't, like if you're not going to match there, like if they didn't rank you high enough, then it moves on to your number 2 and sees where that program ranked you. Then it moves on to 3, whatever, until it finds a match.
Wow, that's so wild. What were the interviews like? Were they technical? Were they more personality based? Were there multiple different interviews?
I would say 90% personality based. There was very little technical. Like there was almost no technical in the sense like nobody asked like specific medical questions. Mm-hmm. The technical ones were like where they asked you like scenarios. Like, oh, you're like picture you're a first year resident and somebody calls a code like let's say there's a cardiac arrest or something going on and like your senior resident you page them and you can't reach them. Like how do you handle that situation? Questions like that.
Yeah.
Behavioral is the word. I guess.
Yeah.
Like there was some behavioral and then a lot of my interviews didn't even have behavioral. Like they were just pure personality questions, like asking about you, asking about like your goals and like your personality and what's important to you. What are your values? A lot of it was that. And then and then with some behavioral questions thrown in to see how you'd handle certain situations and see how you think. They varied very widely. Like I had interview days that lasted like 7 hours, 8 hours long. And I had interview days that lasted 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
So like, yeah, I literally had an interview day where I had one 20-minute interview and that's it. I got on Zoom, did the interview, and that was it. Most that program, it almost pissed me off how little effort they put into the interview day. Most programs will do like a meet the program director session. They'll do like a meet the resident session, things like that. And then they'll do like a few, maybe 2-3 interviews with like faculty or like senior residents to get to know you. And like it would be intermixed with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then like afterwards, they'll have like diversity sessions, women in medicine sessions, different groups that usually came after the interview day. And then sometimes like these programs would host like second look days where they would either be virtual or in person, where they would just like after your interviews, they'd like give you a chance to learn more about the program before you do your rank list.
Yeah, because obviously you need to get to know the program. You're deciding your future as well. Like while they are ranking you, you need to decide, I'm going to be here for a really long time. I need to be happy here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, gosh, crazy. Well, you matched, you did it. You're off to residency in internal medicine.
I did it.
Congrats.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening so far. If you are enjoying this episode, which how could you not be, please spread the word of what's next. You can text, Insta DM, email, carrier pigeon, whatever method floats your boat. But please share the link to this episode or any of my episodes for that matter with anyone you think might be interested. I am trying to grow a business here, so any help would be much appreciated. You guys are the best. Enjoy the rest of the episode. I now want to turn to your journey and learn a bit about why you decided to go down this field. So firstly, do you remember the first time that you were like, I might want to be a doctor?
Yeah, it's interesting because this is going to be like a long-winded answer to that.
I love it.
A lot of people are like, I always wanted to be a doctor. Like I grew up wanting to do this, or like I had this eureka moment where like, I want to do this now. For me, it was a little bit different. I was always exposed to medicine. Both my parents are pediatricians. So like I already knew a bit about medicine growing up and like, shadowing them or their colleagues or like, it was always kind of around my life. I always wanted to do something different than my parents. So then, of course, like when I came to Columbia, I majored in environmental engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And like I wanted to explore that kind of stuff. I'd say the one thing they instilled in me is I wanted to do a job where I felt like I'd be helping people in some capacity. That's why, like, again, like let's bring up our friend Grace. Like that's why we did Engineers Without Borders together, right? Like stuff like that. I that was kind of me like exploring the kinds of things which I would like to do or might be interested in. And with environmental engineering, what I found was it's very, very hard to break out in that field into something where you truly feel like you're helping someone, like joining a startup where you're like truly helping the world. A lot of those startups are unsuccessful. It's hard to even get a hold of them. It takes a ton of effort just to start up.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like a lot of people who do environmental engineering, they end up not doing stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I did an internship at PSEG, which is like the big energy company in Jersey, where I was working in their environmental team. And I was just like, this is not where I want to be. So like, I kind of steered away. Like I only decided medicine my third year of undergrad, which made for a really tough third and fourth year because I had to take a fuck ton of
I was
classes.
about to say, I was like, aren't there a lot of requirements in undergrad to get into med school?
Yeah. And like if you were a biology major, you cover like a lot of the requirements, but environmental engineering, not really. Like I covered the physics and chemistry requirements, and that was pretty much it.
Gosh. So was there anything beneficial about doing your environmental engineering major to help you in your medical school path?
I mean, I still love it. Like I love the field, and I think that it's relevant in a lot of ways to public health, like looking at air quality, water quality, how it affects populations, things like that. I haven't forgotten about that. Like my final thesis project for my multiculturalism class was essentially based on my senior thesis for environmental engineering about urban heat island and the urban heat island effect and how that leads to like worsened health outcomes in poor urban areas. So, there's a lot of ways where I'm still bringing in tidbits from environmental engineering, and it definitely spurred my interest in stuff like health policy. Mm-hmm. Where that'll take a place in my career, I don't know, if any, but that's why I wouldn't call it like useless towards this. Like, for one, it pushed me towards medicine, so there's that. But like even beyond that, like it's fueled a lot of my interests.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you then do anything outside of your academics in undergrad that you think helped in your application to med school?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say what helps. What people say is like, do research. Like I don't mean like actual, like you have to go in and do wet lab research and stuff like that and get publications and papers. And that's supposed to help. I didn't have any publications going into med school. Do a lot of volunteering, that's supposed to help, especially volunteering related to medicine, like being like a volunteer EMT or like, volunteering at blood drives, things like that, whatever it is. There's a lot of that. And then also shadowing, showing schools that you have an interest in medicine, demonstrated by the fact that you go and spend a lot of your free time learning from doctors even before you're in med school. It's a lot of that. And I'll say a lot of it's a grind, and a lot of it's like people aren't actually interested in shadowing. They're just doing it to get the interviews. People aren't actually interested in research. They're just doing it to get the interviews. Mm-hmm. People even take research years and stuff like that. It's not because they're passionate about the subject. It's because they want to get into a better med school.
Yeah.
I did a gap year myself. I went to Wisconsin and I worked for Epic, which is a medical record company. As a project manager, which I thought was a cool experience. But like, if I knew I could get into med school going right out of undergrad, and I also decided so late that I just didn't even have the time to apply on time.
Yeah.
But like, let's say I did, I probably wouldn't have done that here extra.
Yeah. Speaking of the time to apply, obviously the MCAT is a really big part of the grad school application. So what was your process in studying for that? Did you have a process? Did you teach yourself? How did that go?
Yeah, I didn't really have a process. I kind of studied over winter break, one of like senior year of undergrad. I like studied for a month pretty intensely. I'd say most people probably study a little over like more than a month, but like I didn't really have the time, especially because I was taking so many classes. So I just grinded for like a month. And a lot of the stuff that's on the MCAT is like stuff which you learn in your classes, like the biochem, the bio, physics, chemistry, all that stuff. And then there's also like a reading comprehension section of the MCAT, just like there was like on the SAT and stuff like that. That's one which I don't want to say you either have it or you don't, but like that, I feel like that one's like harder to like learn. Like it's just like kind of your baseline from like all your schooling. You can get better at it. You can learn like the algorithms. You can figure out how to solve the questions the way they want you to. But like luckily for me, I think that's one which I kind of already had a little bit. So I've just focused on grinding the other things. And I took the MCAT before I actually took biochem in undergrad because I did that my last semester. And bio ended up being my lowest score on the MCAT. So that's fun.
That's a sign maybe to take biochem before the MCAT.
Yeah, whoever watches this, take your classes before taking the MCAT. It helps.
Hilarious. So then what drew you to the school that you ended up at? Why did you go to that school? Did you do did you apply to a lot of different schools? What was your process there?
Yeah, so for a lot of people, it's less of a choice. It's more of like what they get if you don't have like many acceptances you're choosing between. I had like 4 schools which I had the ability to choose between. I'd say the school which I ended up, New York Medical College, was not the highest ranked of those 4, but like one of the others was like in Wisconsin, which while I enjoyed my time there, it's not somewhere which I wanted to be for 4 more years.
Yeah.
I can't handle that cold. Another school was also in New York. It was SUNY Downstate out in Brooklyn, and that one was a tougher choice. But I had a really horrible interview day there, which kind of sealed the deal. It was pretty disorganized, and then when I exited the school to go back home, the NYPD stopped me from entering the subway because there was an active crime scene, and I was like, maybe not here.
Oh no, yeah, that's something.
And like what helped me choose NYMC as well is that my dad is like he is a pediatrician at Westchester Medical Center at their children's hospital. So like I knew I'd have a pretty robust support network if I went there. So even though it wasn't like the highest ranked of those, like at a certain point, like I'm not deciding between like NYMC and like Columbia Med School.
Yeah.
I'm deciding between places that are not all that different from each other.
That makes sense. Well, it's almost time to wrap up. This has been so lovely, but before I let you go, I want to get some very important advice from you to cap off this whole interview. So, firstly, what advice would you have for the application process for med school?
Yeah, I would say definitely it's getting more and more competitive every year. I watch like the average scores from the MCAT average GPAs like rise like every year. Like it's much harder to get into med school now than it was when I got in. And it was significantly harder when I got in than 5 years before that. So like it's not a be all end all. If you try your best and you can't get it, you can try again. There's a lot of people who reapply. A lot of my classmates who've gotten into like extremely competitive residency programs didn't get into any med school the first time around. And then they took a research year. They did things to strengthen their application. They reapplied. And now they're like going off to like insane places. So it's really not a be all end all. And to that point as well, the medical school which you actually go to, certainly going to somewhere like Columbia Med School can help you get into a better residency, but you still can get into a very good residency no matter where you go, as long as you complete like yeah, at a worse school, you're going to have to stand out a little bit more, but it's not like it's locked away from.
Yeah.
Like there's a kid at my school who's doing orthopedic surgery at Harvard.
Damn.
Like who got into that. Like, so like you can get in anywhere from it. Yeah.
Great advice. Definitely. And then what advice do you have to survive med school itself?
Yeah. So this is something I did want to talk about. So I'm glad we got to that. I think one of the most important things I did in med school was actually not medically related. It's the clubs and activities and the different things which you can do in med school to be part of your larger community. For example, I ran a club called Humans of NYMC, which is very similar. It's based on Humans of New York.
I was about to say, that's very cool.
Yeah, where I kind of took almost your role. Like a lot of it was over Zoom, but also in person. I would interview fellow students and just get a vibe on their interests, see what they want to talk about. Like it would just be a conversation. I wouldn't steer it all that much either, just so that we could all learn about each other, which was so important during the pandemic, especially. And then, I also did like basketball club and all these other clubs where I just came together with my classmates to, just be a part of the community. And I think without that, it would have been a lot harder to survive the actual like trials and tribulations of my coursework and the rotations. And I will say this, almost everybody in medical school feels like there's a certain point where they want to give up and they want to quit and they want to exit medical school. There's been many times I felt that way. And I think that it's very real and very natural. It's not something that you should feel is just you or that makes you inferior, because the what everybody puts out about themselves is like kind of their best selves, like what you see on social media, what people tell you. That's not really what they're going through a lot of times. So like you can't just compare yourself to that and be like, wow, this person seems like they're just coasting through med school while I'm struggling. Because in reality, they're probably struggling too. They're just not putting those struggles out on Instagram or whatever. So like, I think it's good to like have like a support network. It's so important to have friends in med school or like, people you can talk to and care about, because that's the memories which you'll remember. That's why, like I said, like this is almost full circle. I started off by saying, and when you asked me, how do I feel now that I've graduated and now that I'm a doctor? I feel no different, because it's tempered down by like all the great relationships I made in medical school, which I think I'll still keep for the rest of my life, of course. But these people that I did school with made such an impact on me that's what I remember. That's what's important to me at the end. And that's what got me through.
Oh, I absolutely love that. That is such great advice. And that's an amazing, amazing piece of advice and so inspirational. And I think this whole interview will definitely be much appreciated by people who are hoping to go into med school. But finally, last question for you, Amit. What's next?
Well, my parents are telling me to get an MD license plate so that I can have more leeway when parking, and so that if I'm speeding or something, the cops won't give me a ticket. So I got to go to the DMV and maybe apply for that.
Definitely.
I kind of feel like it's a little. I kind of feel like it's unearned in a way. Like I don't want to have an MD license plate. It's like a little bit of posturing, but
dude, you're literally an MD. You deserve it.
Maybe I do drive pretty fast. That's immediately next. Also next is I get to meet the rest of my residency cohort literally a week from today, Monday. So I'm excited to meet them, see who I'll be working with for the next 3 years. Since I'm staying on at the same hospital, I already know a lot of people, which will help. So I'm excited for that. I'm nervous and excited. Anxiety might be the right word, but like anxious. I think the journey still has ways to go. Like I said, if I want to go into fellowship after internal medicine, that could be up to 6 years. And then even after that, there's further training you can do that can prolong that in case I don't want to make money until I'm 40. Like, there's ways to do that. But yeah, it'll be, I think what's important is I'll finally kind of go from that role where I'm being supervised. So I'm still being supervised, but instead of like, it'll be a lesser degree of supervision where I have more of an impact and I can feel more like I was directly responsible for improving people's lives. And that's really what it is.
Oh my gosh, that's huge. Well, very many exciting things coming your way. We will definitely have to get you back once you're a little bit into your residency so we can talk about that next step and the next process. I'm just going to keep circling back to you at every single step of your...
Oh, man.
Get ready. There's going to be a lot more of you coming on this podcast.
Let's see. Hopefully it's good stuff.
It will be. It will be. No, this is so exciting. Thank you so much for coming on. You have such an incredible journey ahead of you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be on here. I'm excited to see what else you put.
Lots more to come, hopefully. We'll see. All right.